thought that maybe we'd start off by going down the line and talking about what is the hot token sale of the moment, the Bitfinex IEO that has reportedly raised $1 billion, it was, for a native token. So today we have Tim Bion of OKCoin, we have Quan Park of Bitrex, and Toby Simpson of Fetch.AI. Quan, did you want to start us off? What do you think about the Bitfinex IEO?
Honestly, I haven't really been following that, so I think I'll pass to the other panelists.
No worries.
There's a risk we're all going to say the same thing, right? That we haven't been following it. I think it's interesting. I'm watching all of this with great interest. I think one of the things that IEOs provides an opportunity for us to do is all grow up a little bit. That this comes with a degree of trust, that somebody is doing their checks and looking underneath the rocks and making sure that everything is as it should be. So I think what happens in the next 6 to 9 months in particular related to this will make a great deal of difference as to how things are going to be for the next few years.
Actually, I've been following it a little. As CEO of OKCoin USA, we're an exchange. We do not participate in IEOs, but as you know, they came out with a white paper maybe a couple weeks ago. How many of you have read it? It's probably about 30 pages maybe, but it's a quick read. And I think actually it's a short and sweet. I think it's a very interesting phenomenon. You have a company that presently has a gap of about $850 million. You know, I come from the traditional banking world, and if a bank was to come out and say that they had a gap of 850, you would naturally have a swarm of bank examiners within 24 hours, auditors, state regulators, maybe even the DOJ, but it's just an interesting phenomenon. It's something that we could not do, would not do in the US for what we run, but it is I think, absolutely interesting phenomenon, and we're witnessing it. So I think all of you should read upon it. No endorsement whatsoever to invest in it. In fact, I think it does ban US customers, but it is very interesting.
Yeah, and there's so many different approaches to the way these token sales are being run. Quan, could you tell us a little bit more about how Bitrex is approaching IEOs?
Sure. So, you know, Bitrex has IEOs available for teams on our international platform that's based in Europe. And I guess I kind of break it down into 3 steps. First of all, the token teams must go through our traditional listing application, which is available online. They also go through additional due diligence through our corporate onboarding process. And then there's additional due diligence that comes with the IEO application process as well. And one of the examples of the additional due diligence that we ask for is, you know, if the project team has partners or advisors that are listed on the website, we might ask for written confirmation to confirm that these are actually real, and among some other things. And all of that is available on the website.
There's plenty of room up front if you guys want to sit. No worries.
And that's actually that access, that whole business of actually looking and being careful and digging that makes the whole thing particularly interesting, certainly from our perspective. Having just been through one of these ourselves, we did an IEO, well, I didn't know it was called an IEO then, it was just a exchange-facilitated token sale. But IEO does sound cooler. And we did that a few months ago on Binance, and the whole process leading up to that was absolutely fascinating because they really dug deep into all of our backgrounds, making sure that we were all who we said we were, that we'd done what we said we'd done. They went through our code in great detail and actually checked that all the things that we said it could do, it could actually do that. And I think that provides a huge degree of comfort to people. That somebody has had a proper look. And that when these reports exist that describe how a business is and what it is that they're doing, and look, and as you said with the advisors, it's easy. You could set up a website tomorrow and put all sorts of advisors on it. I mean, they might not even know you. And I think that kind of environment where somebody is looking is a key part of how we're maturing this space.
Yeah. Tim, can you tell us a little bit about why it is that OKCoin has decided not to have IEOs?
Well, OKCoin USA is a U.S. entity. Its purpose is to serve U.S. customers primarily. And as you know, continuing on from a year ago, we need to be very, very careful whether a token is a security or not. Because we operate in the US and are regulated by FinCEN, we need to ensure that the pairs that we trade on our platform or facilitate trading on our platform are convertible virtual currency. And to be honest, it's a term that is defined way back since April of 2013. So our stance is, we may have an opinion whether we like or dislike a regulation, but as a US entity, we must adhere to it. And therefore, we take a very close look at whether something is a convertible virtual currency that is in scope for us, or a security which we do not have the ability to trade. In the US, you need a ATS and a broker-dealer to facilitate the trading of securities.
Gotcha. So it sounds like in different regions and with different business models, the strategies for growth are really different. Quan, I'd love to hear from you. How are you strategizing for growth through token sales and also through other tactics?
Well, through token sales, I guess, one of the things with initial exchange offerings is it provides teams the opportunity to have, the listing complete if they get through the IEO process, as well as liquidity. I think that's very important to foster the ecosystem. One of the things that I'm working on aside from token sales is expanding our global exchange partnerships and finding partners around the world so that we can provide more access to a lot of the blockchain innovations that we've seen in the United States, but also abroad.
Gotcha. Toby, you had mentioned that trust is a big aspect of IEOs and the due diligence that the exchange does. What are the other distinctions between the 2017 token boom, the ICOs, and the current phase of IEOs?
Oh, well, goodness, that's a big list, isn't it? Back in 2017, you could pretty much write a white paper in crayons on the back of a piece of toilet paper and raise 20 million. You could sit there with a pile of extraordinary scientific equipment and you couldn't find any due diligence at all. And that's not a very safe environment for people to operate in. And I think, whilst everybody has a different opinion as to where regulation fits or should fit in this, I think that actually it's a very key part. And one of the roles that I see these IEOs and the exchange that are doing it filling, particularly at this end of the whole process, is almost pre-delivering some of the things that regulation will deliver, which is one of the reasons why I find it quite interesting. That sort of maturity that we're all doing this in a little bit of a smarter way than we were doing it before. So certainly from that perspective, I think it's actually very, very different. And whilst you do want innovation to be slightly ahead of regulation, the size of that gap is very important. If it gets too big, then there's a great scope for people to do very, very bad things. And if it gets too small, then regulation has a habit of just acting like some kind of drunken octopus and tripping up innovation and not letting it happen. And I think that discussion, that argument over how big that gap should be, which varies from territory to territory, as of course you know very well, is something that's going to be a big part of discussions this year. And it's also, of course, why we certainly know as part of what we do with, say, Blockchain for Europe, that regulators do want to talk to you, they want to listen, they want to learn, they know that we're in this space doing interesting things, they would like, preferably, for that innovation to stick around and deliver this enormous value in this new economy. But they want to do it in a safe way for everybody. They want to create an environment where businesses can do things like open a bank account. I mean, how insane is that? Even now, it's really difficult with this stuff. But also to ensure that everybody involved is safe and that things are what they say they are. And I think that's why IEOs, they provide that additional paperwork. They provide that additional trail for people to look at, to do their own research with a degree of confidence.
Tim, can you tell us a little bit about growth strategies beyond IEOs? How is OKCoin thinking about growth in 2019?
Well, you know, along with IEOs, ICOs, our traditional fiat to token exchange, I think anything that entrepreneurs do, we need to deliver great service to the customer. And therefore, as a new exchange entering the US market specifically, OKCoin USA needs to prove itself. And so it's little things. When you wire us US dollars, we want to give you credit as soon as possible. The traders on our platform are often trying to arb different exchanges and try and make a small profit. And so the speed of execution on our part is very important. When they take out tokens, you know, because of the confirmations that are occurring, sometimes it can take longer than 60 minutes for 6 confirms. So we try to provide services that are tailored to the customer. So recently we launched a program called Premier that gives access to traders heightened benefits, such as even pre-crediting their wire transfers, as long as they can evidence that they made a wire, which may take 1-2 business days, we'll give them credit. So I think as entrepreneurs in the audience here, you can understand how difficult it is to kind of compete in a marketplace, but ultimately we need to provide excellent service, valued service.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And Kwon, you had mentioned looking at regional growth, as in diversifying across different regions. How do you think about creating a cohesive ecosystem despite all these different jurisdictional requirements?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the beauty of having some of these exchange partnerships is that, you know, they're the local team and they understand the jurisdiction and the laws in that jurisdiction. What we're providing them is the technology to be able to support, you know, the innovation that could happen with some of these projects. So it's localized. You know, Tim mentioned that customer support and the experience is very important. We had a major upgrade to our technology, you know, earlier this year, and you know, we're hoping to provide that to our partners around the globe. So.
You said you had a major update to your technology?
Yep.
Can you describe what was that?
We released a new matching engine
Gotcha.
earlier this year, and that had some other upgrades to the system.
Okay, so. That one. Awesome. Toby, I'd really love to hear, because you have this different perspective than the exchange, right, as an issuer. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities as an issuer when it comes to working with many different exchanges?
Oh, well, that's also a good question. Because actually this comes back to what both of you two gentlemen have just said about providing a more professional service, understanding what goes on in the local regions, and making sure that everything is working in the way that it should work. And a big issue that we have is perception and security, the issue over quantity versus quality. I mean, that's one of the things I think will be very, very interesting as the year rolls on from an exchange perspective, but also from an IEO perspective. Are we going to get to the point where there are absolutely tons of these things going on, and will it lose value between those that are just coming up with endless new applications and those that are actually enabling new classes of applications? So there's a lot of stuff there, but security is certainly something that is a big concern, because we live in a different space that if somebody manages to sneak in and steal a pile of cryptocurrency, there's not much you can do about it. And once they've got it, they've got it. And as well as providing a professional service and providing all the facilities that people need and the APIs to allow all these automated traders to run around and do whatever magic that they feel the need to do. Security is a key thing, and to that extent, well, if you squint and look at it from a funny way, cryptocurrencies and tokens can almost look like bearer bonds, but once you've got them, they're yours. And that's very different from what happens with most of these things, where if somebody breaks in and steals a whole pile of stuff, there is actually a chance of recovery. And some things are cancelable and other things are not. So I don't know, I find that that aspect of it is something that sits in the back of my mind on a continuous basis when so much is at stake. Because this sounds a bit weird, but exchanges are almost the centralized component in a decentralized world. And that's also a bit strange, that you have to hand over, particularly as someone who is doing an IEO, you hand over a lot of trust to those institutions, and knowing that there is so much effort going on behind the scenes to bring this up to a level that allows us all to do what we want to do to change the world and all that jazz is important. Helps me sleep at night, mostly.
So what I'm hearing from you guys is, first off, diversity is one way that we can define quality and attractiveness in an exchange. You'd mentioned security, so custody, and then you had also mentioned trust and usability and speed were some of the things that you had mentioned. If everyone, God willing, does these things well, how do you guys distinguish yourselves in terms of quality and service? Are there any additional things or focuses that you're thinking of with your specific audience? I know that's a ridiculously difficult question, but I'm going to let Tim maybe start with it.
Sure. You know, our exchange, we emphasize fiat to token. So you mentioned, or you've heard Binance. Binance traditionally has been a token-to-token exchange, but they are also expanding into the fiat spectrum. I believe Bittrex also started as a token-to-token, but now they're expanding into the fiat realm. OKCoin, throughout our history, we have always been a fiat-to-token exchange. We launched in 2013 in mainland China, facilitating the deposits in of Chinese RMB to the exchange so that domestic Chinese traders could trade into tokens. We expanded into Hong Kong in 2014 to facilitate US dollars to token trading. Only now in 2018, we've expanded into the US to serve US customers. The one thing I want to go back is, even on the IEOs, I don't think you're going to see that in the US because each of our respective organizations, we need to adhere to local regulations. So even the IEOs of Bittrex, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not from the US entity, and it's not to serve US customers. So respective of our organizations, we need to adhere to local rules and laws. And to be honest, there's a lot of other jurisdictions and territories with exchanges, as well as on your part, when you issue your token, you're probably doing it from a non-US entity. And so there's a lot of regulations to be considered, and I think you know, there's experts in the room that can help you navigate that, but it's very, very important.
It's also one of the hardest things, and it's like a huge minefield that's laid out in front of you with absolutely no map going through all these individual regulations, because it's not even a case of what you can and can't say. Even the stuff you can say, you can't say under certain circumstances and to certain people. And you have to get all of this absolutely right in all of the places. And certainly as someone who's been through an IEO, one of the things that you get to is all of this KYC and AML handled in a way that helps you ensure that you don't tread on any traps. But even so, you know, you're sitting often in rooms of lawyers talking about what you can do and thinking, well, goodness, maybe it's just easier if I go and live in a box and keep my mouth shut, because then I can't do anything wrong. But on the other hand, regulations do change, and people do change what is allowed and what's not allowed, and they provide further clarifications. This is something we've seen a lot in the EU, for example, a willingness to hear from those doing it what they need to do, and then working on how we can refine all of this so that we can all build what we're going to build to do what we're going to do in a better environment.
Awesome. Juan, do you want to add some clarity about how Bittrex is making itself unique within this landscape?
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit to that last point. Just, you know, the regulatory environment is constantly changing. And, you know, one of the things about Bittrex is just, you know, staying ahead of the curve, you know, to the extent that we can, and paying attention to those changes, but also being nimble to change with the regulations as they change fairly often, or there's guidance that comes out from the agency. So just reacting and being able to do that, I think, is very important.
Are you engaged with regulators? Do you spend time talking to them? Trying to lead that process? Sorry, I shouldn't be asking the questions.
No, please do.
That's my mistake.
Not personally, but we have a very good compliance team and legal team that does all those communications.
So I have a question for the audience, because I have plenty more questions that I'd love to ask these guys. But if we can all be very nice and quick with our questions and precise, I would open the floor if anyone wanted to. Do we have audience questions? Yes, no? Raise a hand if you have one. Okay, it's allowed. We can turn on the microphones on either side. I will warn you guys that if what you want to do is tell the speaker something, I'll cut you off. But if you have a sincere question for them, then I welcome you to ask it.
Toby and Quan, could you comment on, like, when Binance or when Bittrex decides to assess you, or when they decided to assess you for an IEO? How long did it take, and what was entailed?
How long it took for us and how long it might take for anybody else are, of course, two completely different stories. And this is a conversation that took place over a considerable number of months in the end for varying reasons. Because we're also existing in a market that's a little bit up and down, right? I mean, if you talk to people about their Bitcoin portfolio a couple of weeks ago, you'd have a very different response to, say, if you did it this morning. So we're in an environment that changes very, very quickly, and depending on how you've gained investment and support in the past means that you might find yourself thinking that the right time to do something suddenly becomes the wrong time. So it's not necessarily that the discussions take a long time, it's just you have to get all of the circumstances and all of the... It's like playing a giant game of 3D Tetris. And unless all the pieces fall into place, you just can't do it. And that's one of the reasons why it takes a length of time. But I'm comforted, by the way. I think that the more time it takes and the more that somebody pokes around, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, hi. If you look at exchanges that are decentralized, say something like you're using the 0x protocol or something, and you don't have any custodial holding of the security in the transaction is peer-to-peer, how do you see any shifts in the regulatory issues you have to deal with? Also assuming that the wallets are not in the cloud for you. So you're avoiding the money and the...
I don't believe any of you guys have a DEX project, correct? So just to catch everyone up in the audience, a DEX project or decentralized exchange would mean that traders retain custody of their assets throughout. All of the exchanges up here have a KYC process, which means you submit your ID, and they have a secure system that they themselves manage. So in terms of how a regulatory landscape applies to DEXs, I think that's a fascinating question. But if anyone wants to comment in general, you're welcome to.
Sure. So let's say we all trade equities, IBM, which is traded on the NYSE. But IBM realizes that customers like you and me want to trade on a decentralized exchange. What do you think NYSE, NASDAQ would do? They'll come out with a decentralized exchange. So I think we are looking at it. We don't have a product out there yet, but we're obviously monitoring the space because we are an exchange. We have been an exchange for a long time, so I think you'll see the incumbents or the 5-year-old exchanges continue to look at it. I think what's most interesting, though, is your question touches upon some of the regulatory implications of it. FinCEN came out just a couple of days ago with their interpretation letters of all their prior guidances. And I think what it said, please don't quote me, but I think what it said is, regardless of the medium that it allows, if it covers virtual currency, convertible virtual currency activities that are in scope or has always been in scope since March 2013, it will still be relevant, even for a DEX. And so I think that's going to be interesting, how the regulators adjust to adjustments in the marketplace. DEX is just an adjustment to the marketplace, right? Whether you buy your cereal from Safeway, brick and mortar, or Amazon, or something else in the future, the retail establishment will adjust how you buy your food. Similarly, the regulators for the convertible virtual currency space will adjust, I think.
He had been raising his hand before and was very polite, so I'm going to let him go first, but then you, I promise.
If you want to go first.
Yeah.
You go. Thank you. I just have a quick one for Tim and Quan regarding their user bases, respective user bases, how big they are, and any sort of profile, generic profile of the users on your exchanges, how active they are, geographical distribution of these customers as well, anything that you've learned about them with respect to their sort of net worth or investable assets or age and so on.
Can you give a very brief, distinct profile of who you believe your customers are and how many they are?
Sure. And maybe if I could ask you, what state are you from?
Country am I from?
Residence.
Does that
Where's your
mean, does that
residence?
dictate whether you can answer the question or not?
Huh? Slovakia. So here's how OKCoin as a group looks at our user base, which I think is your core question. If you're from Slovakia, we will serve you from our OKCoin international entity. If you're from California, we will serve you from OKCoin USA. And if you're from Europe, we will serve you from OKCoin Europe Limited, which is based in Malta. So what we are doing is expanding our territories to customize service to our constituents, traders. And therefore, obviously, OKCoin USA is focused on US customers. But even in the US, we must abide by our 50 state regulators. So if you stood up and said, I'm a New Yorker, unfortunately, we cannot serve you. We would have to ban you until we are permitted by the BIT license, which we do not have yet. So it all depends on where your residency is and whether we can serve you or not. In terms of the profile or metrics, I don't think we're ready to reveal what their net worth is, or I don't think it matters, to be honest. I think what matters is really customers voting with their feet. If you don't like our service, you should leave. If you want a decentralized service, that's not what OKCoin offers today. But if you want a centralized exchange that allows you to trade in and out and hopefully arbitrage and make some profits, we believe our customers are trading on multiple exchanges. So they're out there looking at prices and getting the best price that they can.
Yep, and obviously it's personally identifiable information, so I cannot share with you exactly how our users look like and their characteristics, but I will say we have seen increased growth in South America and Southeast Asia. I think there's a lot of incoming customers from those regions.
Definitely. And last question.
Good day, guys. Thanks for that useful information. We are running a very large consulting group in Asia, working with Foxconn, Japan Airlines, and so on. It's the matter of fact for us that we, because we work with many exchanges in Asia, there are a lot of fake IEOs, and I want to know more about it from your side. What are your thoughts? That technically, architecture of many exchanges are not capable to process so many transactions in 15 or 20 seconds, and they all claim that they can sell out, many coins in a very short period of time. That's probably a question to Bittrex or OKCoin. What are your thoughts? And the second question is, it's the matter of fact that many whales get in before anyone publicly know what's the IEO project on many well-known exchanges. How do we make it fair so anyone can participate in it instead of making it an insider info and back profits among the senior management and the project itself? So just want to know more about it, probably from your side. Thank you so much.
We're actually out of time, so I'm only going to limit them to answering the one question, the last one. And I think, Quan, probably you're best to be answering how it is that you can make IEOs more fair and allow everyone to participate, even if you're not an insider.
Yeah, so I believe we've done 2 IEOs to date on Bittrex International, and we're always taking feedback and looking at ways to improve how we're going to do the IEO, and that's one of the things that we're focused on improving. I don't know exactly, I think it's facts and circumstances, so we'll see in the next one.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Can I just say, it's baby steps, right? We've gone from ICOs to IEOs, and then it'll be something else in a few years' time. But each time, we go up a layer, and we grow up a little bit more, and it becomes a little bit more professional and a little bit easier for us all to work in there, and more inclusive and safe for everybody involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining us today.